Hey, welcome to week 9 of the cohorts, and I am thrilled to announce that we have Duncan Welder, who is stepping in for us today. He has a lot of expertise in this particular topic, so we're very fortunate that Duncan can join us today, digging into build a business case for xAPI. Before I turn the microphone, camera, slide deck over to Duncan, I'm going to walk through a few things with you all as a reminder. The xAPI party is coming up on April 27th. You need to RSVP for that to be a part of it. In addition to being a part of it, we're also encouraging everybody to show their work. This is a chance for even the smallest of initiatives to kind of be showcased, walk through what you've been doing, what you've learned in the process, who you worked with, why you did it. Just think about those things. Karen and I are working on some stuff for everybody to kind of help hone your messaging around that. So be sure to reach out to us if you have a question. Another good opportunity is at the end of Duncan's session today. We're going to have some updates. Karen will walk us through on how projects are going and have an opportunity to share that. So when Duncan wraps up, stick around for a few minutes so you can have an opportunity to see how things are progressing. Just a reminder too, coming up, I'm headed to Orlando. Maybe you'll be joining me. We'll be at the Learning Solutions Conference. And there are multiple sessions about data and measurement. Two are highlighted here that Jeff Batt and Megan Torrance will be engaging in at that particular conference. So it's a great opportunity for you to join us. And register still open, obviously, and hotels are available. Hotel room space is available. So please look into registering and joining us at Learning Solutions. And the last thing I'll remind everybody of is to become a member of the Guild. It's free. And you get opportunities to be in cohorts like this, for example, but also it gives you an opportunity to dig into our publications, our research, access a lot of recordings, get all the information you need about upcoming events emailed right to you. It's just a free opportunity to become a member of the Guild. So Duncan, I am going to give you ample time. Let me drop my deck here so you can pop in, and I am going to slip away. Have a great presentation, and we'll see you around the end.
Hey, thank you so very much. I'll go ahead and share my screen here, and we will go ahead and get started. So let's see, that should get us there. Um, say if when I'm in full screen like this, I have trouble catching any of the comments coming through. So if there is something that comes up, you guys just please let me know. Um, as Mark said, my name's Duncan Welder. Down in Houston, I work for Risk. I've been, oh gosh, with Risk now just over 20 years. And we were early adopters on the xAPI side of the world. I'm always thrilled to present for this cohort because one, everyone's got a similar passion and is interested in learning more, and we can jump right into the meat of things. But if I do move through something too quickly, or there is an issue there, just let me know. I will try to make sure we have a little time for questions there at the end if anything does come up, and also making sure that I give plenty of time for the uh, the team presentations, because I want to see what kind of work is happening there as well. So talking about building a business case for xAPI, I really wanted to start off with why now for xAPI. Well, why are we, why is this a concern at this point? And I think there are a lot of things that you probably already know, right? We've got all these mobile devices. A lot of them are individual personal devices that are being used in a business setting, even though they're not necessarily controlled by the organization, as opposed to to a computer very often. There are different delivery mechanisms for training, things that we're doing that are outside of your traditional e-learning kind of content or instructor-led content, some more blended solutions and things like following up with micro learning that really XAPI tends to lend itself well to. The ability for us to go through and do analysis on data is greater than it's ever been. You see that with all the different business intelligence tools and visualizations. So, it's one thing that now we can capture this data. It's very different that we can do something with it, make use out of it, and use that for better business decisions and helping students and adapting, to their needs. XAPI gives us a great opportunity for what I think of as deep content evaluation, being able to go in and see how people are interacting with different learning experiences, tie that to performance data, uh, decide really with much greater intelligence what content is valid, what are the different interactions that are helpful for students, what things miss the mark. So again, XAPI gives us so much more insight there versus just saying, what was a score, what was a duration that someone was involved with training, how many tons of human did we train this last year, those older kind of very basic metrics. Again, with the inundation, is that a word? Being inundated with new and different streams of data all the time, different information. One of the things we have to really look at is, how do we provide information to our learners that is valuable to them and is not wasting their time. So XAPI again supporting personalization and adaptive learning, and then again from a remote work standpoint being able to uh, to reach out and touch those uh, folks that are not working inside the office, may have completely uh, remote access, and say, how do we provide feedback, how do we provide coaching, how do we provide them the support and the information to do their jobs and continue to improve. So some of those benefits that I see really jumping out that XAPI provides. We can record learning everywhere, right? It doesn't have to live in a browser. I don't have to launch a content module. It doesn't even have to be modular, right? I can find those and track things that are happening with mobile devices, in social networks, in games, simulations. So, a lot of different places I can look for training. And before jumping right over into building a business case, um, I had waffled a little bit on um, including this slide because you guys know what XAPI data sources are. I didn't start off with, hey, we've got actors, verbs, and objects because I recognize the context of the group. But I do think from a data source standpoint, this is a good place to start thinking about that business case because of all these different ways of gathering data. Whether that's um, I think it was traditional LMS data that might be going to a learning record store, blogs, games, simulations, um, ebooks, PDFs, all those things. The question really is, what is the data that one you're looking for and what can you make use with there, because having a data strategy of, well, I want to collect everything really doesn't provide a lot of benefit. So as we go through and talk about some of the different questions we can answer with xapi, think about what are some of these different sources that I might want to gather information from as well. So, with that, we'll jump right over into building a business case. And if you probably remember the movie Fight Club, I'm using this without any permission or access from them, so nobody report me. But the first rule of Fight Club was You don't talk about Fight Club, and the second rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. And I'd argue that that's really the same thing that we have to do with xAPI, right? If we're building a business case, no one cares about necessarily cares about the fact that it's xAPI enabled. What are the benefits? What kind of intelligence are we missing out on now that we can uh, gather once we are in an xAPI world? And then again, what new methods of training can we deliver? What kind of documentation can we now have to provide evidence of someone's competence or skill level on a particular task? So these are the questions that we need for building the business case, not necessarily worrying about the plumbing. Um, that said, I'll tell you our first commercial project to do uh, with xAPI, the client that came to us with it said that they wanted to set up an xAPI application for essentially making notes and annotations in these in their training materials. They said, no, there's already plenty of other good tools for doing that, right? You could do ebooks or other things, and they were really adamant that they wanted xAPI in the solution there. And some of the big benefits are realistically in the backside of it, once they can convince us that that's the direction they really wanted to go, is in a lot of the reporting and analysis there. So even though some people will be interested in the new technology, for the most part, I like the idea of ignoring that and coming in and saying, yes, we can do this because, and knowing in the background it's xAPI that supports that. And I've got a couple other examples that we'll take a look at there. So moving forward um, with xAPI, building that business case, I think it's key to recognize that different levels inside the organization are going to have different challenges. The things that are concerned of the C-suite can be different than management, can be different than IT, your students, your learners, whatever the proper term is. You might have battles with the existing learning and development department, and getting that what's wrong with what we're doing now kind of attitude to work through. And then ultimately vendors, because you get so often vendors that aren't necessarily um, up to date with new specifications and what those capabilities are. So how do we work to better educate those folks in helping us build that business case? So again, selling, hey, you want to use xAPI? No, of course not. Now, you say, what content are learners actually using? Well, that's something I do want to know an answer for. If I want to, do you want to reduce time to competency? Of course, the answer's yes there. So that's really my direction: is how do we get to those yeses? It's not because we're going to use xAPI, we're going to actually do something that adds to the bottom line. So, from a C suite perspective, the again, technology is probably not the main focus. It's teaching productivity, it's becoming efficient, teaching innovation, having evidence of training so that you can satisfy, again, if that's a regulatory requirement or just an overall improvement for employees and performance, then I need to be able to see that and track those things. I think other challenge from the C-suite side is changing student demographics, and I don't mean that at all from a uh, generational millennials and Z's and X's and all that stuff. But I personally know that over the past 10 years, the way that I seek out information is very different. I'm going to YouTube to look for, how to do something around the house. I am bouncing onto my phone to check out recipes instead of opening a book or going to a class. So how do we manage getting information out to people that are already, again, inundated with information and communication? So again, another challenge is that a lot of the current tools may not be the most efficient things out there. You know, traditional e-learning, instructor-led training that's taking people away from their job versus being able to try to provide training and coaching while they're on the job. Again, a lot of remote coaching is or has traditionally struggled there with how do you really understand what someone is capable of if they're not actually there to provide uh, maybe some demonstration of performance, and we rely again so heavily on testing there. So if we have rules or tools that are not working, we've got challenges to student demographics, and we're coming into uh, really try to affect the bottom line and improve people's work, then we have to measure those things. So inside business, and this is just a, kind of a Google Analytics dashboard, but your marketing folks know every place that someone is, or every place someone is coming into the website, how they're navigating through. Um, your sales folks know what the pipeline looks like, who's in what phase of that pipeline, what regions are the hottest ones, what products, those kind of things. Even getting down to your Fitbit, right? You can track all of this data and compare it to other people, but we do very little of that in training. So, or traditionally have, because we had a limited amount of measures that we can really provide. I make the joke about how many tons of human did we train this year, but that's exactly what we do. We say everyone received on average 24 hours of professional development. It's like, well, gosh, what does that mean? What is the impact of that? So if you're only going to be able to improve what you measure, we have to start being able to measure those skills. And one of the nice things about xAPI is I can measure skills in context. So while someone is going through training content, I can look at um, the way that they are interacting there and provide a different route or a different path as they need. Or I can look at the way people are interacting while they're in work with a software application. And if I'm going in and I see this particular behavior, and I can instrument that with xAPI and say, hey, this is a an issue, and maybe there needs to be feedback there, or even looking at actual performance data on the job, right? Where I want to be able to go in and monitor how someone is doing their job. And if something seems like it's out of scope, it's out of balance, it's taking longer than I need to, then I can head off those problems without waiting a year for an annual performance review to say, gosh, this is an area you can improve. So remember, xAPI is really an interoperability specification at the end of the day. And it also has a lot of capabilities with Internet of Things devices. So, one example that I saw a while back is a group that operates large mining trucks, and they have essentially a simulation where you drive that gets evaluated. You get a constant, ongoing um, report card, if you will, so that you improve your performance first in that simulator. But then their idea was to put as they already have GPS tracking inside these mines, but to put devices on things like the brakes and the drill heads to monitor, as someone is in a particular part of the mine, are they using the proper brakes? Are they using the right speed and rotation on the drill equipment? So if they can do that, and now at the end of the actual work day and say, hey, these are the things that you did really well. These are the things that could be improved. Then again, I can shorten the time away from the job that I'm on training and have the opportunity to improve performance without delay. Um, let's say this is another example. There's a group um, that I worked with that do well, their oil exploration in this group, but they had all of this training. They didn't see that it was making a huge impact, and what they did is they decided to go ahead and revamp all of their training content, put their quizzes, tests in with xAPI added that identifies the specific competency that they're trying to measure there. And you can see, again, here at the bottom, they've got this series of dashboards where there are passed and failed questions by objective. And this one very long bar at the top that says unknown is SCORM data that they still haven't converted yet. But there are other topics they can see, passed versus failed. What are my, bad actor areas? They've done the same here at the top. Again, because they're just pulling that xAPI data, they've got some charts to show, you know, checklist satisfied, not satisfied by competency, by objective. And they've coupled that with non xAPI data. So these up and down bars that you can't really read, that's all safety data coming from a wholly separate system. So again, being able to combine and paint a picture, tell a story that says we need to do this, I think is incredibly valuable there. Of course, there are going to be different challenges that come from really your first level uh, or middle management folks that are really focused on reducing time and cost, right? Because training is something that pulls people away from their job and is seen a lot of times as an expense without a clear impact. Uh, you need to do more with less, so I have to be able to improve performance, and then I want to improve retention. Now, in this case, I'm talking about um, learning retention. They're also talking about uh, employee retention as well, which good training and having you know positive work environment always seems to help that. But in my case, when I'm saying retention, I'm thinking about using tools like micro learning, like spaced learning, like simulations, uh, maybe you know flashcards and things electronically that help improve someone's ability to remember that content that they have been trained on or are now using. So, again, from a solution standpoint, that inline training helps reduce time and cost that someone's away from the office. The ability, like we saw with that safety data and training data, to see learning and performance data together and provide that continuous feedback so I'm not surprised when someone's performance is poor, or I find out that gosh, you know everybody passes the test because the standard is an 80, but no one ever passes any of the questions out of this one area, or there might not even be questions over a particular area, an objective, a competency, something there. And again, being able to leverage those new processes where instead of going in and sitting at a computer uh, in a lunchroom for a maintenance employee, he or she could get a text message now directly. They don't have to log into an LMS that sends back xAPI data to a learning record store, and then that gets filtered back over into their learning management system. So there's a record that they actually went through and completed that stuff, but never pulling them again back off the job. IT challenges, obviously different. So, one of those is they don't want any more solutions to support, right? This is how you end up with monolithic enterprise systems, because say one solution is easier than having multiple, even though not necessarily the best route. It needs to lower cost and it has to be secure. And xAPI can really it can really speak to all three of those, right? So, from a support standpoint, there are a lot of cloud-based options. It's certainly easier to understand the data and the specification than SCORM. Um, which I don't understand the specification for at all. Even working with it now for, you know, 25 years. It's much more modern. It's REST and JSON based, and it allows for things like distributed content. I can put things out on a content distribution network, not unlike, again, the old SCORM days where I had to load content to the same server where my LMS resided, right? Eliminate those cross domain issues there. With the CMI5, which the kind of the xAPI profile for launching content from an LMS, you can use a CDN without a problem, which is what most of your websites now that you hit will do, right? And, if you go to buy an airline ticket, the little calendar controller isn't part of that website that you're downloading. It's coming in from the nearest content distribution network somewhere in Google land, probably. And then from a cost standpoint, there are some free options for pilot work to get buy-in there, but certainly, tools are going to have a cost, except for things like that group earlier that I showed that had the Power BI. That's their internal tool. They already had expertise, so they didn't come to us for anything other than clarification on the data structure. So, and you can reduce costs by having better integration, uh, or easier integration using xAPI. And of course, xAPI can be perfectly secure. It started out as a DoD initiative. As a matter of fact, this is a image I love, and I was at a presentation by the ADL at the end of last year on their total learning architecture. And one of the things that they are doing is recognizing that currently they have all these separate systems that don't speak to each other, don't communicate, and after having, dozens of chances to move to a, or projects to move to a single government-wide LMS, they realize that that's not really the best route for them to have one central system. What they really want is to federate all these data streams using xAPI into, their authoritative um, learning record stores, so that they can track essentially someone from the time they take an ASVAB in 10th grade until they are out as a productive citizen with all of their training from the military there. So this is a lot of the work that we've been focused on over this last year, is how do you manage and translate that data between different systems. But again, from cleaning up standpoint, IT folks will like that. And part of that is because xAPI by specification has to be portable. We have to be able to move that data from location to location. So from one LRS to the next. And it could have some, maybe this, I'm sending data purely in an anonymous manner without any um, personally identifiable information, so I can run reports, in one system where I might have a hardened system, or hardened LRS for, again, kind of final qualification and job training there. Students, I don't think there's all that much challenge from students outside of, gosh, I don't want to do boring training. Um, but people are interested in improving their performance on the job, I think, legitimately. And there are also legitimate concerns about data privacy. And again, students here, I'm not, even though I have a, a child image on the graphic there, this really runs across the board. If I want to kill boredom, I can do things like micro learning. I can do social learning with threaded discussion groups and capture all of that data inside or with xAPI, and report on those things. I can deliver games and simulations. We do done a lot of work with adding xAPI to Unity code to be able to see how someone does move through a particular simulation. How do you qualify someone on a task if they're doing it, again, without actually being, in the field, but instead inside the headset. Again, from a uh, performance standpoint, I think having real time feedback is always critical. Again, being able to deliver training out over time to help push the forgetting curve up, and maintain more of recollection of information over time is important. And again, we already talked about the fact that xAPI systems can be secure. But again, we can also look at things like anonymized data. I know especially with minors, and a good example is the children's hands-on children's museum in Ann Arbor, where they do have all of the exhibits instrumented with xAPI. And at the end of the day, if a teacher brings their class to the museum, they can go through and they can see this group of students went through these exhibits, and these group of students went through these exhibits, and these are the tie back to the state credentials that or state curriculum. I'm sorry, that they work for. So they do that, but they don't track any student data. It is just essentially groups, and then the actual teacher kind of takes that information to do what they will. Again, from an L&D standpoint, it doesn't work with my current tools. How's it different from SCORM? And I think we've turned a corner a bit there, but very early on, everything that I heard was, gosh, we're going to have um, xAPI is going to be the new SCORM, and I can get rid of my LMS and replace it with an LRS. It's like, well, not necessarily true. But the other challenge I always get from the L&D side of the world is if I have to talk to my IT group about it, it'll never get done. So how do we head again that off? And then my LMS just isn't ready. Which again is true in a lot of cases, but I think we're turning that corner. So the state of development tools is quickly improving. Most rapid development authoring tools, I'm seeing changes every single release that they make. Learning record stores are getting better and better, especially from the standpoint of being able to do native visualizations. And then I hope at least, as an LMS provider for years, that learning management systems recognize that they are just another xAPI activity provider, right? So if I, you know, register for an instructor-led class in my LMS, and that goes to my supervisor, and my supervisor approves it or declines it, all of those things make sense to me to be tracked through xAPI, so I can monitor that information. I really think the learning record store becomes the uh, authoritative source of that data, at least from a holistic standpoint. All right. So again, a couple of the benefits there, and I recognize I'm getting close to the end of time. So again, some things based purely on the specification, the fact that xAPI requires that content can read and write to an LRS, and an LRS has to be able to take an approved content, and with that, or statements, and uh, with the proper authority, I can be able to read those back, so I can really leverage that from a adaptive learning standpoint. Don't feed me content that I've already shown that I've mastered. And then, from a the standpoint of instructional design, I can share data across different activities. So if I have one piece of content or one type of of learning activity that's writing data to an LRS, I can have another activity that reads that same data out and maybe feeds me different information or pre-populates parts of content module or whatever the case is there. The last one, and then I'll wrap up, is a challenge from vendors. And I'm not going to make it to Learning Solutions, but if you see me at DevLearn, I'll be in this exact same outfit. But the vendors kind of like, oh yeah, we could do all the APIs, and SCORM was never relevant for us. Is this thing going to stick? And I think that this is really again a corner that's been turned because, say with xAPI, there's really one API to rule them all, at least in the learning space. So it eliminates all those one-to-one APIs between systems and customization middleware. xAPI is getting stickier by the minute. I mentioned developer tools, but LMS and LRS, plus now with adoption from the IEEE and the creation of test suites through um, through the ADL, we have a lot of momentum behind us at this point. So with that, I recognize I am a minute over what I told uh, Karen I would bounce off for. I'm going to just bounce this out forward. We could talk about some other examples there, but I know I was rushed today. I'm glad to answer any questions, and I'm super easy to find. So email me, catch me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Both use the same ID, the Duncan WIV, and I appreciate the time so much. I'm going to stop sharing here, and now I'll be able to see you guys for the first time.
All right. Thanks, Duncan. I'm trying to bring Karen back up on stage, and it's not allowing me to do so. So, Karen, if you're listening, for some reason, I am powerless to put you back on stage. So we'll just give it a minute here. I'm looking over there's two sections here, Duncan, and there's a Q&A section and there's a chat. I don't know if you answered this. I have stepped away for a second. Did you see this one in the Q&A from Sherry? I can read it to you, Duncan, if you can't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but I don't.
Yeah, let me do that. It says, thank you. Is it possible for learners to take their learning records with them when they move from one organization to another?
Ooh, I think the answer is yes and maybe. I mean, from a technical standpoint, the answer is certainly yes. And when first started talking about xAPI, there was a lot of buzz about having a personal learning record, right? That I could take from one location to another. Was it felt a much larger push, in Europe than it did in the US, where companies will, I've had companies that turned off the reporting inside their LMS because they were afraid that employees would print out their transcript and go down the street and find another job. So I do think that there is. I think because you need to have this portable record, and if it works in one LRS, it has to work in any conformant LRS. But I think the challenge is how do one, do you identify what is portable data, and two, who owns that data? I don't know if is necessarily landed, at least uh, in the U.S. market, right? Is my training data owned by the company or that paid for it, or is it my own? Right? Some things are clear, right? If I my driver's license, if I need to provide documentation, I'm going to carry that with me when I leave the job, a welding certification, a degree. But I think that's one of those that's still up in the air, but conceptually, absolutely.
All right, Mark. So I'm back on stage. Hi,
Well,
everybody.
welcome back, Karen. I'm glad you pulled it
Hi.
off. You're a magician.
I just want to extend our thanks to Duncan. He jumped in, and it was really great for him to be here and give you that information. Mark's going to be watching out for any additional questions that might be might want to ask Duncan. But in the meantime, I've asked Doug Hahn to the stage. So, Doug, if you want to turn your camera and mic on, he is with Team Chat GPT, and he is going to give us his team update.
Thanks, Karen. Duncan, that was awesome. And we said it right this time. ChatGPT, it's not the most, it's kind of a tongue twister. We like to call ourselves Chat Souffle, as I said last week. So we're cool with that too, I think. So yeah, as mentioned last week, we're trying to use xAPI to learn how the community here feels about AI tools like ChatGPT. And our ultimate goal is to fire up a discussion on using these tools more effectively, or maybe like why not to use them and why we all hate them. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is going to be, and maybe neither do you. So to that end, we're creating an interactive learning experience in Twine to get people using ChatGPT in a structured and focused and playful way. The final product is going to be an experience built with free and open source tools, so everybody can take advantage of xAPI's interoperability, which we talked about today, as well as the amazing resources communities like Twine offer. So we've, as I mentioned last week again, we've got a team of learning pros, developers, and even some data people. And to that end, we've divided into cross-functional swim lanes with developers and learning designers. And I'll give you updates on those now. So our learning team has finalized some of the content while the developers are solving problems concurrently based on the team's list of verbs and interactions that we're planning on having in the Twine course. And we're starting to actually build out complete web pages, or passages, as I should say, in that course. Our dev team this week ran into some unexpected roadblocks. When does that ever happen with developers, huh? Namely, having to switch story formats in Twine. You guys can be I'm happy to answer any technical questions you have in Slack. But basically, the story format we were using was pretty awesome, but it's not well documented, and it's like really hard to like learn xAPI and then figure out software that doesn't have good documentation. So we actually switched story formats. We've also added functionality to create and add actors to groups based on survey answers, adding a context to all of our other xAPI statements based on what group that actor is associated with. And finally, we've got xAPI voiding statements where needed, and we're sort of refining that functionality as we go. That's an important one because in the Twine game, you can start over and resubmit answers, and we don't want to jank up our data with a bunch of noise. So we're having teammates start to look at test data we're generating this week and seeing if the general kinds of verbs, contexts, and responses we're generating are going to be useful. So we're getting data people in there to start playing with what we're building. So what do we need now? We still need lurkers. If you want to lurk, come hang out. We need JavaScript developers who can dive into a repo, make pull requests, and maybe keep our code dry. We need data people, as I said, and we need technical writers who can help us produce docs faster. I would love to build a wiki for Twine people or people interested in Twine on getting xAPI working. It seems like that was a tricky problem for the community to solve from the outset. I'm going to put some links here for you in the chat, and come hang out at Team Chat GPT, aka Chat Souffle. Souffle. Yeah, right. We can create docs with that too. That's so meta. So go for it.
All
Build some
right.
docs in Chat GPT, and we can put some Chat GPT in our Chat GPT. I'm down. So that's our update.
Thanks so much, Doug. That is great. And you have some great documents in there. You guys are so organized. That's wonderful. But know that, there's a lot of work being done in cohort. And even though you may not be as organized, you may be all over the place, we still want to hear from you. So drop me a note and ping me in Slack and say, hey, you know what? We just got our LRS. We're just sitting here and figuring it out. And this is what our learning and what we've learned. That's fine. We'd love to hear from you. But for right now, I have Michelle McQuarrie from Team Rise who's going to give her team's update. So, Michelle, over to you.
Hey, all right. So we've been working with with Rise, articulate Rise, and as anyone that uses articulate Rise knows, it has very limited data, like 3 things that you can get. And so we've been working on something to plug in, like a plug-in, to make Rise send the xAPI data that we want. So our mighty leader Becky has been working on a JavaScript file to save within the Rise folder. And the theory is that if you edit the index of the HTML file to use the JavaScript that's in the folder, the file will have the info needed to use the xAPI data that you want from the course. Since our team is pretty small, we could probably get more done if we had a few more code script people. But we'll probably end up with a standard statement and limited extensions that we can use in Rise. And hopefully this will be like a core project that other people can build on. Maybe you have more advanced skills and want to take it on. That would be, something great, something we can all use to get our data from Rise. Because it is a great program. It's very easy and online, but the data harvesting is so limited. It holds people back from what they really want to accomplish in learning. So that's what we talked about this week. It was a rather short meeting, and we are turning in a proposal, like I said last week, so we're working on that too.
Oh, that's awesome. That is absolutely great. I'm so happy to hear about that. So we do have our call for proposal. It ends tomorrow. And all we want you to do, there's a short survey. I'm sure you can find it in Slack, or I'll post it on Main today. We're accepting proposals until tomorrow. There's just a few little text boxes where you describe your learning, what you've done, and then we have the xAPI party on April 27th, and you will get an opportunity to showcase your work. And really, if you're a newbie, please consider showing your work. If you're advanced, show your work. We're going to all learn from each other. So I think I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, I don't have this full complete project, I can't do it. No, we want to see the work you've completed in cohort. We want to know that this experience had a value for you, and that maybe you just learned that there's a learning record store, or maybe you just learned that there are actors and verbs, and you created your first xAPI statement. Be proud of that, because now you're just advancing your learning, you're progressing, and we want to see that, and we want to celebrate that with you. So with that, I want to make sure that you're all invited to the xAPI party on April 27th. We dropped a link in chat, or I will put it in Main, where you can register for that. And then I will also put the link for the calls for proposal that ends tomorrow for the xAPI party, where we will have teams present different aspects of the work that they have been doing. We also have two what we call share your work days that are the last 2 weeks of cohort, the 13th and the 20th. And we would like to see some of those teams give some longer updates, in essence. And we're, like Mark said at the beginning, we're working on some language to help you kind of focus where we would like you to maybe answer some questions. And you'll get some more information about that later, but we would love for you to join us. So drop me a line or drop Mark a line in Slack, and we'll hopefully see you on one of those 2 days. Thanks so much, everybody. And Mark, I'll go ahead and close it off and tell everyone we'll see you next week.